Most people think they need to earn six figures to build real wealth. I used to believe that too. I thought wealth was for other people. People with high-paying boots, two incomes, no kids, or just better circumstances. I told myself I would finally start saving when I made more. I would start investing when my income increased. I would get serious about money someday. But someday never came. What did come were bills, stress, overdraft fees, late-night anxiety, and that sinking feeling when I looked at my bank account 3 days after payday and realized I had no idea where it all went. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't reckless. I was just stuck. I was living paycheck to paycheck, constantly playing financial defense, always reacting instead of planning. I kept thinking the problem was my income. If I just made more, everything would be fine. Until one month, everything came to a head. An unexpected car repair, a missed utility payment, a grocery bill I couldn't cover without using a credit card. Again. And in that low moment, something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. I realized if I didn't learn to manage this income, I'd never be ready for more. Because more money wouldn't fix my habits. It would magnify them. That's when I found the 50-30-20 rule. Not in a finance course, not from a guru, just a simple post online. 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for saving and debt. That was it. No complicated spreadsheets, no 14-step plan, just a framework. A way to take the swirling chaos in my mind and divide it into something I could actually hold on to. At first, I thought it was too simple. I mean, how could this tiny structure just fix what years of stress hadn't? But I was desperate enough to try. So I did something I'd never done before. I opened up all my bank statements, highlighted every transaction, and put each one into a bucket. Need, want, or save. And what I saw shocked me. My needs were actually 70-80% of my income, but not because they had to be. I had subscriptions I didn't use, DoorDash orders I'd forgotten, automatic charges I didn't notice. I thought I was just scraping by, but I was really just unaware. So I made one decision. I would live by the 50-30-20 habit for the next 90 days, no matter how small my income was. And here's the truth. I couldn't hit 20% savings at first. I could barely hit 5%, but I did it anyway. I saved something. I automated $2 a day into a separate account I didn't look at. I trimmed my wants, not by cutting joy, but by choosing value. I swapped convenience for intention. I cooked more. I canceled what didn't matter. And little by little, I found room where I swore there was none. And that's when the magic happened. Not in the money itself, but in how I started to see myself. I wasn't broke anymore. I was building. I wasn't surviving. I was structuring. I didn't feel powerless. I felt in control. That's what the 50-30-20 habit gave me. It wasn't a budget. It was a mirror. It showed me my choices. It showed me my patterns. And it gave me a framework that worked whether I made $2,500 a month or $5,000. It flexed with my life. It didn't punish me. It protected me. It gave me something solid to come back to when emotions were high, when temptations were loud, when life got messy, which it always did. But now I had something stronger than motivation. I had a system. And the longer I followed it, the more I realized wealth isn't a number. It's not a salary. It's a habit. It's how you move when no one's watching. It's how you treat your money when it feels like you don't have enough. It's what you protect, not just what you earn. And as the months passed, I watched my savings grow. Slowly, quietly, one transfer at a time. I watched my stress shrink. I stopped fearing bills. I stopped chasing paydays. I started making decisions from a place of peace, not panic. And the most surprising part? I started to feel wealthy long before the numbers on paper confirmed it. Because wealth is clarity, it's confidence, it's breathing room, it's knowing that you have options. And every time I made a decision within that 50-30-20 framework, every time I honored my budget, adjusted with life, forgave myself when I fell off, and simply returned to the structure, I was casting a vote for a new identity. I was becoming someone who leads their money, someone who doesn't wait for someday to feel in control, someone who builds wealth on any income. Because I finally understood. Income is a tool, but habit is the engine. So if you're listening to this and you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or like you're not there yet, I want you to know this. You don't need more money to start. You need more intention. You need a plan that works with you, not against you. That bends when life does. That gives you structure without shame. That invites you to grow, one paycheck at a time. That's what the 50-30-20 habit did for me. And it can do it for you, not someday. Today, right now, because financial freedom isn't about earning more. It's about learning how to own what you already have. One habit at a time. 1. The financial struggle. For the longest time, my relationship with money was built on one repeating belief. I'll start saving when I make more. It sounded logical, safe, even mature. I wasn't denying the need to save. I was just postponing it to a future version of myself who, magically, would have everything figured out. But that future never came. What came instead were more bills, more stress, and more excuses disguised as life. I wasn't spending wildly. I didn't have a luxury lifestyle or a shopping addiction. I was just doing what everyone around me seemed to be doing, living paycheck to paycheck, always catching up, never getting ahead. Rent, groceries, gas, subscriptions. I forgot to cancel, birthday dinners, that one-off emergency that turned into a credit card charge. It all blended into this endless cycle of reaction. There was never extra money, just enough to survive, but never enough to build. And the worst part, I didn't feel broke. I felt busy. I was working hard, showing up, doing everything right. But I was always tired. Tired of checking my balance every time I swiped my card. Tired of hoping a refund or surprise paycheck would hit before my account hit zero. Tired of lying to myself every month with the same phrase, but next month will be better. But it never was, because income wasn't the problem. Intention was. I kept waiting for more money to fix the stress, but I never stopped to look at how I was actually spending what I already had. And that realization hit hard one night when I sat down to look at my bank statements. Not with shame, but with curiosity. And what I saw shocked me. It wasn't just the big bills draining me. It was the small, consistent leaks. The 12th I spent on 3 separate delivery fees that week. The $99 subscription I hadn't used in months. The 20 just this once impulse buy that showed up 5 times that month. It wasn't about the amounts, it was about the awareness. I wasn't managing money, I was dodging it. Hoping things would balance themselves if I worked hard enough. But no matter how much I earned, the results stayed the same. Because I wasn't being intentional. I wasn't giving every dollar a job. I was letting it disappear, a little at a time, into things I couldn't even remember. And that's when it hit me. If I couldn't build discipline with the income I had now, I'd never be ready to handle more. More money wouldn't make me better. It would just magnify what I already was. And at the time, I was overwhelmed, reactive, and lost in the fog. That's the financial struggle no one talks about. It's not just about lack, it's about chaos. The mental weight of never feeling secure. The exhaustion of always calculating whether you can afford to say yes. The quiet panic that comes every time an unexpected expense pops up and ruins your plan, if you even had one. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't irresponsible. I was just missing a system, a framework, a way to see clearly and choose wisely. And the moment I stopped blaming my income and started owning my attention, everything began to change. I didn't suddenly become rich, but I started becoming aware. And that awareness, that shift from waiting for more to working with what I had, was the true beginning of wealth. Because money will never be enough if your behavior isn't aligned. That was the hardest truth to learn, but also the most liberating. Because once I accepted that, I stopped waiting for a raise to feel in control. I stopped hoping external change would create internal peace. I started asking better questions. What do I value? Where is my money actually going? What would happen if I made intentional choices for 30 days? The answers weren't easy, but they were honest. And honesty became my superpower. Because in a world where we're told to fake it, hustle, and act like everything's fine, choosing to look at the mess and own it was revolutionary. That's how it started. Not with more, but with clarity. Not with luck, but with intention. And that shift from survival mode to strategic living changed not just my money, but my mindset, my confidence, and my peace. And it all started the moment I stopped believing the lie that I'd save when I made more and started building with what I had. 2. Discovering the 50-30-20 rule. After hitting that wall of frustration, after staring down the hard truth that my income wasn't the issue, but my lack of structure was, I went searching for something simple, something doable, something that didn't require me to become a financial expert overnight. I didn't need a spreadsheet with 47 color-coded boxes. I didn't want it to read a 300-page manual or subscribe to a budgeting philosophy that made me feel like I could never have fun again. I just wanted clarity. And that's when I stumbled across the 50-30-20 rule. I don't even remember where I first saw it, probably a blog post, a YouTube comment, or some random infographic that popped up in my feed. But the second I read it, 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for savings and debt, something in me exhaled. It felt doable. It felt human. It wasn't some all-or-nothing system that punished you for enjoying life. It wasn't rigid or judgmental. It was simple, flexible. It gave me structure without suffocation. And for someone who had always either ignored my money or panicked about it, this felt like the first invitation to meet myself where I actually was, not where I wished I'd be. It gave me permission to stop chasing perfection and start focusing on intention. For the first time, I had a framework that didn't make me feel behind. And then it made me feel equipped. I could look at my income, whatever it was, and divide it into something that made sense. 50% for rent, food, transportation, and basic needs. 30% for things that brought joy, coffee with a friend, a weekend outing, a streaming subscription. 20% for future me, savings, debt repayment, emergency fund, even investing. It was the first time I saw a budgeting structure that didn't scream, "No fun allowed until you're financially perfect." It said, "Let's be smart and let's be real." And that clicked. Because I was tired of guilt-driven budgeting. I didn't want to build a life where I was always restricting, always feeling behind. I wanted to build a rhythm that helped me breathe, not one that added more pressure. The 50-30-20 rule became that rhythm. It wasn't always exact. Sometimes my needs were 55%, sometimes my savings were 15%, but the framework stayed. It gave me guardrails, not handcuffs. And most importantly, it gave me a new mindset. This is something I can do right now, not someday. That one thought changed everything because I didn't need to wait for a raise. I didn't need to pay off all my debt first. I didn't need to be a money guru. I could start this today with the income I had. It made me feel empowered, not ashamed, capable, not confused. And when you feel capable with your money, even a little, that's when you start to move. That's when you stop avoiding and start engaging. And that's exactly what the 50-30-20 rule did for me. It turned budgeting from something I dreaded into something that gave me back my power. 3. Starting small and adjusting. Once I understood the 50-30-20 rule, once it gave me that moment of, yes, I can actually do this, the next challenge was putting it into action. And here's where the honesty comes in. I couldn't hit 20% savings right away. Not even close. My income at the time was tight. My rent alone took up nearly half my paycheck, and life didn't exactly pause to let me recalibrate. There were still groceries to buy, bills to pay, people's birthdays, random gas spikes, and those surprise expenses that always seem to show up when you've just started trying to get it together. So no, I didn't hit the perfect ratios. But I started anyway. I told myself, if I can't save 20%, I'll save 5%. And that 5%, which felt small at first, like a drop in the ocean, became my anchor. Because it wasn't about the amount, it was about the consistency. And from day one, I decided to automate it. Not because I was lazy, but because I knew my emotions around money were unreliable. If I waited until the end of the month to decide how much I had left to save, the answer would always be nothing. So I flipped the script. I set up an automatic transfer on payday. $5, $10, whatever I could manage, first, not last. It didn't feel like much, but it removed the mental gymnastics. It made savings part of the process, not part of the leftovers. And with that one small habit, that quiet little automation, I took emotion out of the equation. No more guilt, no more debating, just movement. And slowly I started adjusting everything else around it. I looked at my spending with fresh eyes, not through the lens of punishment, but through alignment. Did this expense make my life better or just busier? Was I spending out of boredom or intention? And as I got honest, I began creating categories that fit my real life, not some financial textbook. I didn't pretend I didn't like going out with friends or ordering the occasional takeout. I didn't cut everything. I just started to prioritize. I built a fun category on purpose. I labeled my groceries separate from my snacks. I stopped pretending one big monthly number would magically balance itself. I made it messy. I made it mine. And that ownership gave me freedom. Because once you build a system that reflects your reality, not someone else's rules, it becomes sustainable. You don't have to cheat it. You don't burn out. You flex. You adapt. And over time, that 5% grew to 7%, then 10%. Some months I hit 15%. Eventually I did get to 20%. But the only reason I got there is because I gave myself permission to start small and adjust. I didn't wait for perfect. I started with possible. And every small win reinforced the identity I was building. Someone who takes care of their money. Someone who plans. Someone who saves by default, not just when life gives them a break. And that identity? That's what carried me through the days when money still felt tight. Because now I wasn't reacting. I was designing. Slowly, imperfectly, but intentionally. And that's where wealth begins. 4. The identity shift. Something amazing started happening the more I stuck with the 50-30-20 habit. Even when the percentages weren't perfect, even when the numbers were small, even when I had to adjust and readjust just to make it work. I started seeing myself differently. At first it was subtle. I noticed I no longer avoided looking at my bank account. I stopped flinching every time I got a bill. I wasn't waking up in the middle of the night worrying about overdrafting again. But underneath those external shifts was something deeper. I was no longer reacting to money, I was directing it. That identity shift was the true win. Because before I always felt like money was happening to me. I was on defense. I was constantly adjusting to problems, scrambling for solutions, reacting to expenses I didn't see coming, even though they came every month. But now I was telling my money where to go. I was making choices on purpose. I had a plan. I had categories. I had boundaries. And for the first time in my life, I had discipline. Not the kind that feels heavy and exhausting, but the kind that feels empowering. Because when you build habits slowly, when you honor your current capacity instead of forcing someone else's template, you build discipline without burnout. I didn't wake up and suddenly become frugal. I didn't follow some hardcore no-spend challenge for 90 days. I just made intentional decisions over and over in ways that respected both my future and my present. That's when I realized something most people never hear about money. Structure isn't restriction, it's freedom. We're so used to seeing budgeting or planning as a limitation, like we're being punished for not earning more. But the truth is, building structure around your money is like building a fence around your peace of mind. It's not there to box you in. It's there to protect what matters. And once I had that structure in place, that flexible, my living framework that I could adjust as life changed, I didn't feel limited. I felt safe. I didn't feel deprived. I felt empowered because now I knew that every dollar had a purpose. I didn't have to rely on motivation. I didn't have to wait for the right month. I was already living on purpose. And that gave me room to breathe, to dream, to plan long-term without panic. I didn't feel like I was fighting against money anymore. I felt like I was finally teaming up with it. And that's the power of habit. That's the gift of structure. It transforms who you are from the inside out. It turns you from a spender to a steward. From a reactor to a director. From someone overwhelmed by money to someone who walks with quiet confidence because they know exactly where their next dollar is going and why. Or 5, real results over time. The more I stuck with the 50-30-20 habit, adjusting when life demanded, staying consistent when motivation faded, the more I began to notice something incredible. Real results started showing up. Not overnight, not in a lightning bolt moment, but slowly, quietly, and undeniably. The first milestone came one random Tuesday afternoon when I logged into my bank account and saw my emergency fund had reached $1,000. I just sat there and stared at it. Not because it was a huge amount, but because I had never seen it there before. Not in years. Not ever. That money wasn't from some windfall or tax return or gift. It was built habitually. $5 here, 20 there. Slowly stacked through tiny daily choices that didn't feel like much at the time. But together they became a cushion. And that cushion gave me something no loan or credit limit ever had. Peace of mind. Then came the next shift. My debt started going down. I stopped adding to it. I made minimum payments, then a little extra. I started budgeting in chunks to send toward balances I used to ignore. And with each small payment, my fear got smaller too. What used to feel like an impossible mountain started to feel like a hill I could actually climb. It didn't require intensity, it just required rhythm. And then something I didn't expect started to grow even faster than my bank balance. My confidence. I walked differently, talked differently, showed up in conversations about money without shrinking. I started helping friends with their budgets. I started feeling qualified to give advice, not because I was an expert, but because I was walking the path. And maybe the most powerful moment of all? One day I realized I felt wealthy, even though my income hadn't dramatically changed, even though I wasn't driving a new car or traveling the world or hitting some viral net worth milestone. I just felt wealthy because I had options, because I could handle small emergencies without spiraling, because I had margin in my life, because I didn't wake up in panic or go to bed in guilt, because I knew where my money was going and why, because I had finally created something I could rely on. And that feeling, that quiet, grounded freedom, meant more than any paycheck ever had. I realized that wealth isn't a number. It's a state of mind you earn by showing up every day and building trust with yourself. And that trust, that's the real currency. That's the kind of wealth no one can take from you. That's the wealth that makes the numbers eventually rise because the person behind them has changed. The results? They're real. But what matters most is the way you start to see yourself long before the world sees it in your account. 6. The 50-30-20 habit echoes a lifelong framework. As I kept applying the 50-30-20 habit month after month, through seasons of tight income and times of financial progress, something deeper began to take root. I realized this wasn't just a budgeting strategy. It wasn't just a temporary fix for a rough chapter in my life. It was a lifelong framework, something I could carry with me no matter how much I earned, where I lived, or what season I was in. It worked when I was earning just $500 a month freelancing and barely scraping by, and it still worked when I got a better job and started bringing in $5,000 a month. Because the power was never in the numbers, it was in the habit. And that's the part most people miss. They think if they can just increase their income, everything will sort itself out. But the truth is, more income without a system just leads to more leakage, more unconscious spending, more lifestyle creep, more pressure to keep up with the new normal you've accidentally created. And that's why so many people making 6 figures still feel broke, because income alone doesn't build wealth. Habits do. That's the magic of 50-30-20. It grows with you. It scales. It's not about restriction. It's about rhythm. It gives you something to return to when life gets chaotic. It gives you a way to say yes to joy, yes to the future, and yes to your real priorities, without falling into guilt or confusion. When my income grew, I didn't feel the urge to inflate my lifestyle. I didn't immediately upgrade my car, move into a bigger place, or buy things just because I could. Why? Because I had a system. a framework that reminded me, keep your needs at 50, your wants at 30, and your savings at 20, or more if you can. That quiet rule protected me from impulse. It gave me permission to expand with purpose, not pressure. It helped me invest more without fear, save more without sacrifice, and still enjoy life along the way. The habit became automatic. My savings grew with my income. My generosity grew too, and I never felt like I was starting over every month because I had structure. That's what makes this habit so powerful. It's not just for getting out of survival mode, it's for staying out. It's not just about scraping by. It's about rising with clarity. It's not just about restriction. It's about freedom. And most importantly, it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you start. Because once this habit becomes part of who you are, your income becomes a tool, not a crutch. You don't need to earn more to feel in control. You feel in control because you've built something stronger than income. You've built a system, a rhythm, a habit that lasts a lifetime. Wealth isn't about how much you earn. It never really was. Because I've met people who make six figures and still feel broke, and others who live on modest incomes but walk with peace, clarity, and control. The difference isn't the paycheck, it's the plan. It's about how you direct what you have every single month with intention, not emotion. The 50-30-20 habit became that plan for me. It turned chaos into clarity. It gave me a rhythm to follow when my emotions were all over the place and my income was far from ideal. It helped me save when saving felt impossible, invest when it felt intimidating, and say yes to joy without guilt. And over time, it didn't just change my finances. It changed me. It gave me peace of mind when life was unstable. It gave me progress I could see, even when the numbers were small. And most importantly, it gave me power. Not because I had more, but because I finally knew how to lead what I had. That's the real secret. You don't need to earn more to feel wealthy, You just need to act like someone who values every dollar and directs it like it matters.